All right, everyone, welcome to another pre-show. Here we are now that Charles is finally done being creepy.
Well, why should I? I mean, look, we are beginning the Mardi Gras season, Carnival, and they're all dressed for it. You see that one guy looks like what's his face, Pagliacci, the clown. He's got a little
Yeah.
hat and all that, and that lady over there has her Venetian mask on. Doesn't that look wonderful?
Yeah.
I want you all to know, especially those of you in the pre-show audience who are wearing your Mardi Gras masks. For the beginning of the mask mandate with COVID, I wanted to wear a Mardi Gras mask.
Oh.
It leaves the nostrils and mouth free and just go around. But I'm wearing a mask. You said I had to wear a mask, so I'm wearing a mask.
That should be that. I'm surprised nothing like that turned into some movement where I don't know, some sort of reactionary movement where it's like,
Yeah,
okay, you want masks? All right, here's masks, and then
you get
it turns
masks.
into this other thing.
Yeah, it was Zorro masks.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Masks are coming down though, at least in California, this upcoming
What a
week.
loss.
And Gina just showed me this news item because it was everybody other than LA County. Everyone was moving the indoor mask requirement. LA County is going to remove the outdoor mask requirement.
Oh, they're so very kind. Our lords and masters. I could just kiss their feet with cyanide.
Wouldn't you wait? Wouldn't you die though? Wait, would you both die? What is that? What's
Prob-
that?
yeah, probably.
Wow.
But if I took them with me, no, I don't mean that, ladies and gentlemen. Suicide, I would never be in favor of. And you can't call it homicide if they're not human. I'm just
Okay.
saying.
Okay.
No, I shouldn't be so hard on our lords and masters because when you have no brains and you're in charge, it's very difficult.
I know. Every day's a struggle.
It is. It really is. And don't forget that old adage: "Clutch not your pearls before swine."
So what does that mean again?
I'm not quite sure, but you know what clutching your pearls is.
Yeah.
That sort of faux outrage when you know very well that I mean it's like oh, the bishop doesn't know any Latin, he's an utter illiterate. How could this be?
Oh,
You know very well the bishop is a product of the seminaries of the 70s. It's a wonder he can spell his own name.
I see.
You know very well that I'm not speaking about your bishop or mine, I'm speaking about bishops in general.
Yeah.
um, how could they possibly? Oh, gee, because that's what they do. Don't be ridiculous. You know better. Oh, there's corruption going on in the police department in Chicago. Heavens to Betsy. Clutching your pearls.
I see.
So don't clutch your pearls before swine.
Makes sense.
It does, I guess, in a way. I'm not quite sure how you would use it, but it shouldn't be abused either.
That's
I
right.
think we've got to break down these false dichotomies, these arbitrary distinctions.
I agree.
We've got to get to the center of consciousness itself, not unlike Ed Wood with Plan 9.
Did he get to the center of consciousness, and what did that look like?
It looked like the scene where the airline pilot is trying to get his wife to go home to stay with her mother.
Hmm.
And she says, most men get upset when their wives go home to mama. And he responds, that's not the point. And she says, oh, supreme moment of realization. That's all the point there's going to be.
Ah.
See? And you thought you were going to get some deeply Lovecraftian wisdom there. Well, I showed you. And if that doesn't beat the price of bananas, I don't know what does.
All right.
What? In the face of an increasingly irrational world, my response is to give it its own back, good and hard.
That's right. I mean, we just have to remember this life is nothing short of an unveiling quantum shift of ever-present consciousness. All right.
Oh, somebody had done reversed his ions. Let them ions flow. I can feel the multiverse percolating like an old coffee pot. I can see all the strings in string theory being played like a harp. All right, ladies and gentlemen, fine. You want us to go to you want us to descend to the realms of the real? We will.
All right.
Go not to the surrealists for counsel, for they shall say both blue and hippopotamus.
Yes, epic Bonnie's line, our friend.
And if anybody knows, she does.
Yes.
She's in Denver right now.
Why?
Well, she's got friends there, and she stayed with them for like a month or something. But it's really great because, one of her major complaints, having lived almost her entire life in Southern California, is that she never has really gotten to see the seasons.
Oh.
So she's really been in a Colorado mountain high for the past month, and she's really been enjoying it.
Good. Yeah, that's good. All right, questions time.
All right.
A bunch of questions from Superfan Don from
Florida. Superfan Don from Florida.
Yeah.
The Tallahassee Chassis from FLA. That's a song.
Oh, okay.
She's my Tallahassee lassie. There's something about her chassis. Anyway, it's a 50s song before your time, before my time.
So Don says, greetings from Florida, where we are welcoming refugees of COVID tyranny from all over the world. I find it interesting that the location of the true first Thanksgiving and discovery of this great land is now the epicenter for the welcoming of those looking to begin anew amidst the old world of pandemia.
Ooh, a new name for the great country that covers the globe.
Yeah.
Pandemia.
I like that. Nevertheless, I have some wide-ranging questions for the Titan of Tumblr and Sir Charles to consider. Please give my best to Tyrone.
Oh, you better give your best to Tyrone, or that boy be taking it.
Yeah.
No, but I think we're all suffering from pernicious pandemia. Just like they did in Salem's Lot. No, that was pernicious anemia. Sorry.
Oh.
Although our leaders are kind of like vampires. Let's move along with this.
Oh, okay. Speaking of Florida, it is becoming harder to find affordable housing for families who are earning what used to be considered a very comfortable living. Part of this is due to corporate investors buying up a quarter of the home inventory and then flipping for higher prices or renting them. I am for a truly free market, not what we have today, but in your opinion, should corporate investors be allowed to have this much impact on the cost of housing when families and individuals do not have access to the same capital as they do?
Well, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know this much. In any healthy society, the laws, and that includes tax and other laws affecting finance, encourage the growth of families. That's why you give tax breaks to families the more children they have. Well, that's what you should anyway. That's why families where the mother stays home and takes care of the kidlets ought to get tax breaks that two working folk do not get.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it reinforces sexist stereotypes. Oh, gee willikers. Yeah, well, go build a civilization based on non-stereotypes and see what you get out of your money. So I would definitely say that, if you're in a situation where young families do not have the prospect of being able to own their own homes, given work and so on, and raise a decent family, then you've got a setup that's unhealthy, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Florida, incidentally, I'll just say for those who don't know my feelings about the state, and I do have them. It's got some very nice places. I could do without a lot of Jacksonville, frankly. Although there's some nice places in Jacksonville. I don't want you all to feel left out. Then I have a what's the word? Traumatic memory of Jacksonville, Florida. Very traumatic. It so happened one New Year's Eve I was in Jacksonville. It was New Year's Eve 85, 86. And not only was the only sparkling beverage available to me at the cheap motel I was staying at cold duck rather than real champagne. That was bad enough. Much worse, the news came in over the radio that Ricky Nelson had been killed in a plane crash.
Who's Ricky Nelson? Ricky Nelson?
Who's Ricky Nelson?
I know Buddy Holly, so but Ricky Nelson is like a poor man's Buddy Holly or something?
Well, not exactly. He was the younger son of Ozzie and Harriet. And after the show ended, he became a musical star in his own right. And his daughter, in turn, became an actress who was on the Father Dowling Mysteries with Tom Bosley, who's also dead. I'm tired of dead people dying. I wish there were live people dying. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, Jacksonville, Florida will always be in my head with that forever. But I do like the Spanish monastery they moved there. Anyhow,
yeah.
So Jacksonville is it has a lot of dumpy areas, but St. Augustine is gorgeous. I love St. Augustine, Palm Beach. There are parts of Miami I like very much. Coral Gables. Before it became so, shall we say, alternative, I used to really, really love Key West. It's a little too West Hollywood for me now. But in the good old days, going down to the Keys was great. La Mirada, Sid and Roxy's Green Turtle Inn. And Key West itself, the people who settled it originally, and now they use this as a name for people who live there, but originally the conchs, as they were called, like the shellfish, were the descendants of loyalists from the Bahamas. And they got to the Bahamas after the American Revolution, and then just sort of settled the innumerable little islands and keys, and settled the Florida Keys under the mistaken impression that there was still more Bahamas. A misapprehension the United States Navy corrected. But they continued to live there. And the old conch families were very often still closely connected with their Bahamian cousins in places like Spanish Wells and so forth. And I knew a lot of people like that in Key West. They're almost all gone now because it became a very expensive place to live. Still, I really, really loved the Florida Keys. And if that weren't enough, Naples, Florida is the home of your favorite Ave Maria University.
Nice.
Tampa, there's a town for you, the cigar-making capital of the United States once upon a time. And then Pensacola, like St. Augustine, is the other old Spanish city in Florida. So now you've gotten my quick tour of the Sunshine State.
Nice.
If it makes you feel better, and it won't, Palm Beach, which is a place I really love in Florida, it's kind of a place for the well-to-do, Beverly Hills by the sea, but it's really neat. My favorite restaurant there is called Taboo. And whenever I go to Palm Beach, I'd always be ushered into the same area in Taboo. And I never understood why, until one day, one of the throwaway papers in Palm Beach had what they called a sociological map of Taboo. And there were different sections of the restaurant with people who said there was like mafia bosses on the run, ladies who lunch, I was continually put into the section marked poets and philosophers.
Wow, they got you pegged pretty quickly. What? They just see you come up and it's like, oh, poet and
Yep,
philosopher.
over there. But there was a section I was very happy they didn't put me in.
What?
Shepherds and their lambs.
I don't understand. Like what?
Well, I presume it's older gentlemen and their younger female assistants.
Oh. Okay, I never heard that metaphor for that before.
I hadn't either, but as soon as I saw it, I knew what it was.
Oh, okay.
This is Miss Magruder, my personal assistant.
Wow.
Are you able to type, Miss Magruder? Type A and B.
Okay, let's move on.
Oh, what? Oh, you think Miss Magruder's an idiot? She has skills.
All right.
But she puts her shoes on all by herself.
All right. So yeah, I'm sure Don from Florida appreciated your
little run through his home state.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, Don, what I'm trying to tell you is, especially, and it's not because you're a super fan. All right, I don't suck up to the patrons despite being constantly pressured to by management. I don't do that. But no, I do like Florida. And you understand, for a Southern Californian, going to Florida is kind of weird. It's like the floor walker at Macy's stepping over to Gimbals. You know, it's
Wow.
a little odd. Florida, before the state went crazy, California, not Florida. Florida was our great rival in the retiree catch-all match. I mean, Arizona never came close. They get a lot of retirees, but it's more budget because they don't have seacoasts. You ever hang out by the ocean in Arizona? I didn't think so. I mean, you can go to the Grand Canyon, you can go to Sedona, both of which I like. Flagstaff is neat. But Phoenix, really, come on.
All right. If my beloved Italia were reconstituted as a monarchy today, whom would be the rightful heir to the throne?
Ooh, therein hangs the tale. Well, first thing you should know that monarchism, per se, when it comes to Italy, is a misnomer. It is really monarchisms. It's funny, my last piece for Catholicism.org is on this very question. So go to Catholicism.org, The Long Defeat, Part 5, I think, Italy. It's all about Italy. And you'll see it. Basically, in the year of our Lord, 1859, the Italian peninsula was divided thusly. Way up in the northwest, you had the Kingdom of Sardinia, named after the island. But in addition to the island, what's got its name, it had Genoa, Torino, Nizza, Savoy, Piedmont, and of course the most important part of Italy, the Val d'Aosta.
Right.
What?
Yeah, the French part.
Yeah, that's right. Anyhow, although Savoy and Nice had a lot of French too at that time. Now they are part of France, and therein hangs that tale. So you had the Kingdom of Sardinia. You had the next door to it, to the immediate east, was the Lombardo-Venetian kingdom, whose king, crowned at Milan with the Iron Crown of Lombardy, was in fact the Emperor of Austria. So the Kingdom of Sardinia was ruled by the House of Savoy. The Lombardo-Venetian kingdom was a separate territory of the Austrian Empire, but it was separate. It was a separate kingdom. Then, going a little bit south, you had a few little countries. You had the Duchy of Parma, which was under a branch of the House of Bourbon, descended from the Spanish Bourbons, and particularly the greatest monarch in the history of the world, Carlos III. The greatest because, of course, he founded Los Angeles.
Yes.
Then you had, immediately to their east, you had the Duchy of Modena and the House of Austria-Este, which was a mixture of their former ruling house, Este, which died out in the male line. Their heiress married a Habsburg, you guessed it. And so that branch of the Habsburgs was called Austria-Este. Then to the south of them, you have the Grand Duchy of Tuscany under yet another branch of the Habsburgs called the Toscanas for strange reasons. Then you have the Papal States, which were directly under the Pope. They consist of areas called the Romagna, the Marche, Umbria, and Lazio, or the Patrimony of St. Peter. And the capital, of course, was Roma Eterna. And then south of them, you had your ancestral homeland, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Had your capital at Naples under another bunch of descendants of Charles III, Carlos III, the Bourbons of the Two Sicilies. So these were the kingdoms of Italy, the ruling houses. All right. Well, in 1831, the main line of the House of Savoy died out, and they were replaced by distant cousins. Now, the main line were very Catholic, very conservative, but their replacement cousins were liberal in the body of a person called Charles Albert. He, in turn, had a prime minister called Count Cavour. And Cavour wanted to unite the whole of Italy under his master, the King of Savoy, or the King of Sardinia, rather. So that was the beginning of what was called the Risorgimento. To accomplish this, he did two things that Italy had never seen before except under Napoleon: heavy taxation and conscription. And by doing so, he built up a centralized government. He also ended local liberties and suppressed the privileges of the church, and all of which brought in more money. And with it, he then brought Sardinia into a big conflict, the Crimean War. I bet you're wondering, why would Cavour send young Italian lads to fight in the Crimea against the Russians?
Mm-hmm.
You wondering about that?
Yes.
Well, the reason was that he could come into the war on the side of Britain and France, and thus be their ally. And that was very important for the next piece of the puzzle. In 1859, he convinced Napoleon III to go to war with Austria over Lombardy. He did. The Austrians were defeated. The French annexed Lombardy and then gave it to Sardinia in return for Savoy and Nice. The Val d'Aosta, however, remained under Sardinian control, and to this day groans under foreign oppression. Anyway, what? Anyway, so the at that point, the Sardinians went after their neighbors. After they nicked Lombardy, they pushed Tuscany, Modena, and Parma over like ninepins, none of which had real armed forces. I mean, they had guards, but nothing like the armed-to-the-teeth Sardinians. And they also seized Romagna from the Papal States and called on the Pope to surrender his territories to themselves. The Pope refused, called for volunteers to defend him, and that was the beginning of the Pontifical Zouaves, of whom you've heard. They came from all over the world to fight for the Pope, even from Italy. And with Sardinian support, Garibaldi began his conquest of the Two Sicilies, which fell in 1860. So now you've got Venetia, which is still in Austrian hands, and the area around Rome, Lazio, which is still controlled by the Pope. In 1861, I think, the king moves his capital from Turin in Sardinia, in Piedmont, to Florence in Tuscany. Because, of course, the capital of Italy, of the kingdom, Rome. 1866, the Austrians go to war with Prussia. The Sardinians jump in on the side of Prussia and attack. The Austrians defeat them handily. But because the Prussians win, they're able to demand that the Austrians give the Sardinians Venetia. And finally, in 1870, the Franco-Prussian War gives Napoleon III the excuse to pull French troops out of Lazio The Italians invade, and the Pope orders his army, after a token resistance, to surrender. And then for quite a while, there's the whole prisoner of the Vatican thing, until the Kingdom of Italy and the papacy signed the Lateran Accords in 1929, which establishes the Kingdom of Italy and the Vatican city-state. So, during that period, Victor Emmanuel the Second, who was the King of Sardinia, that was king all through the conquest of the Papal States, he was excommunicated, of course, but reconciled to the Church on his deathbed through the direct action of the Pope himself, Pius IX, who was the one he aggrieved. Well, his son, Umberto I, became king, Umberto the Good. And here you had a very strange situation because, unlike his father, Umberto was personally very pious. But by this time, Italy was established as a constitutional monarchy. So he had no more control over affairs than the Queen of Great Britain does today. So he could not solve the Roman question on his own. And he was excommunicated as King of Italy. So what did they do, you ask? They came to an accommodation. As King of Italy, he was excommunicated. But as Umberto de Savoia, he was a member of the church in good standing. So every morning, he had a low mass in his apartments. And yet, there were no masses to mark the great events in the life of the Italian state. And of course, the Pope, in response to 1870's usurpation, had put in what was called the non-expedite, which meant that devout Italian Catholics were not to take part in Italian political life, so they didn't vote. And I mean, a lot of them did, but the most devout people did not vote. And this continued for many years until, as the socialists became more and more powerful, St. Pius IX ended it so that they could vote against socialists. And you had the formation of Catholic political clubs, but not a Catholic political party. So the conservatives, quote unquote, in Italy were of their nature anti-clerical. And you know, an anti-clerical or irreligious conservatism is kind of almost a contradiction in terms. So that was the sort of messy situation that was ended by the, first by Benedict XV after World War I, when he declared that Italians could now compete politically. And that was the beginning of the Popolari, the Catholic Party. In 1922, Mussolini took over and slowly transformed the Italian state. And then, as I say, in 1929, he signed the Lateran Treaty with Rome, with the Holy See. And so now the Vatican and the Kingdom of Italy were allied. But in the meantime, I should mention, Umberto had been assassinated by an anarchist in 1900. Victor Emmanuel III became king. They call him the Soldier King because alongside Emperor Karl of Austria and King Albert of the Belgians, he was one of the very few leaders to actually go to the front and experiencing the fighting himself. So they called him the Soldier King. He's very short, very diminutive. His wife was a Montenegrin princess, Elena, and you'll be happy to know that she is a servant of God. Her cause for canonization has been introduced. Very devout, in other words. All right, well, 1922, Mussolini marches on Rome. Victor Emmanuel III makes him prime minister. And he, as I say, transformed the countries. He signs the accord with the Holy See. He's an ally of the West, incidentally, with Britain and France, because Italy, of course, had been on their side during World War I. Now, here's where it gets bizarre. One of the things that Italy did was, under Mussolini in foreign affairs, was to back up Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria in the Balkans. So that's why when Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933, Mussolini, although Hitler admired Mussolini and wanted to emulate him, Mussolini had no use for Hitler at that time. But he was very friendly with the Austrian Chancellor, Dollfuss. In fact, Dollfuss's wife and children were vacationing on the Italian coast when the Nazis murdered him. And so the Italians rushed troops to the Brenner Pass, and Hitler disavowed any connection with the attempted coup, and the independence of Austria was preserved. But then, 1935, Mussolini decides he wants to take over Ethiopia. Now, again, as with everything in history, there's a background here, but basically, the Ethiopians had defeated a previous Italian attempt to take them over in the 1890s. And Mussolini and a lot of other Italians had never forgotten that Italy was the only country to be defeated by Africans. So they were sore about that. And they invaded Ethiopia. Now, to do so, he consulted his allies, Britain and France, and the British foreign minister gave him the impression that they would not care if he attacked Ethiopia. So he did. But unfortunately, those foreign ministers misled him. Or it could be that the governments of Britain and France didn't realize how annoyed the reaction of their populace would be to this. But however it was, Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia led to his condemnation by the British and the French and the League of Nations. And that was when he switched sides in 1936, and he became much more friendly to Hitler. And that, as we see, 2 years later doomed the independence of Austria, who no longer had a strong ally. So Italy, then in 1939, the war breaks out. In 1940, as France is falling, Mussolini sees the chance for a quick snatch and grab. He declares war on the side of Hitler, invades falling France, and is defeated. Even though Paris has fallen, the Germans are pushing down, the French were able to defeat the Italians pretty handily. Now, just this is a by the by. It's not because the Italians are terrible soldiers. Not at all. The reason, and this, the history, both the Spanish Civil War, where the Italians fought very well, and during the fighting with the Russians on the Eastern Front, when the Italians had an enemy they really disliked, they fought very, very well. But if they didn't have a problem with whoever it was they were supposed to fight, they just didn't do very well. They weren't serious about it. So that's why my advice to any Italian leader in the future is don't pick a fight with anybody your people don't loathe. They don't loathe them, they ain't going to fight them. They're more sensible than most people, I guess. So there's a compliment for the Italians hidden in there if you want to look for that one. It's in there. Now, why is all of this very necessary to understand? Well, you'll see. 1943, the Allies take Sicily, and the king, he will switch sides. And that's what happened. When the Allies landed in southern Italy, the king had Mussolini arrested. He deposed him from office, which was his right to do. He had him arrested and switched sides. He knew that the Germans would not take well to this, and they didn't. They invaded quickly. Bear in mind that they were already all over the country. Ever since Mussolini had faced the collapse of Italian Libya in the North African fighting, the Germans had troops all over the place. So they attacked the Italians, and the Italians fought back, but it was, shall we say, more than unequal. It's interesting, though, that not only that they fought very hard, but in Tientsin, China, where the Italians had a concession, a little tiny bit like the Italian Hong Kong. It's a small area. The Japanese called on them to surrender when they switched sides. They refused and died fighting to the last man. So let that be a lesson to you when people tell you Italians don't make good soldiers. The other thing, though, is that when the war ended, although the king had been instrumental in their switching sides, his reputation was ruined. So he abdicated in favor of his son Umberto II. Umberto tried very, very hard to shore up the monarchy. They had a plebiscite in 1946. Now, the American authorities contributed to the rigging of that referendum. And it was rigged. The Republicans won by a paper-thin majority. The armed forces asked the king if they would like them to basically void the whole thing. And he said no. Italy had already been through a lot, and he was afraid that the result would be a civil war. So King Umberto left the country, and he went to Portugal, where he took his wife and children. He died in 1980. I was in school, so 1980 or 81, he died. Now his son, Victor Emmanuel, see Umberto, Victor Emmanuel, Umberto, Victor Emmanuel, Umberto, Victor Emmanuel. It's like the Danes, Christian Frederick, Christian Frederick, Christian Frederick. Anyhow, he married morganatically. He had kind of a wild 60s. And the result of all that was after his father died, and really exacerbating in the past 20 years, was a succession dispute between himself and his first cousin, the Duke of Aosta, who claimed that Victor Emmanuel was no longer the heir to the throne, and that he was instead. So why am I telling you all this? Well, I have to, because if I don't, the situation as to who would be king of Italy won't make any sense. But you see, it's all very complex. So who do we got now? What are we talking about? Okay. Oh, one thing I neglected to mention was that prior to 1870, there was very little immigration from Italy to the rest of the world. Very little. Afterwards, millions of Italians left to the United States, Canada, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Can you guess why?
Why?
Well, because the new regime was very centralizing, and they brought in the whole heavy taxes and conscription that the rest of the peninsula had not known. I mean, that's the reason why your own great-great-grandfather said farewell. This didn't happen. They didn't suddenly say, "Wouldn't it be great to go to New York and start our own crime?" Would it be great to go to New York and seek out business opportunities?
There we go.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Anyhow, because I assure you, if it hadn't been for that, they would have happily stayed in Bari, venerating St. Nicholas and honoring the King of the Two Sicilies. But instead, they left. And there was also a long guerrilla war against the new authorities called the Brigantaggio. Anyhow, so where does this leave us? Well, basically, if you look at, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. In 1859, the Sardinians signed what was called the Convention of Villafranca. That convention agreed that Italy would be a federation. of monarchies, like Germany became after 1870. Well, that was never honored. So, in recent years, in addition to everything else, you've had a lot of stress between the different regions of Italy and the central government. So you've got the League of the North, you've got the Neo-Borbonici in southern Italy who'd like to see either an independent or an autonomous southern Italy. Same with Tuscany. I mean, you've got all these different things in play. Okay. So now, if you think of the Kingdom of Italy as a whole, there are two claimants to the throne. One is Victor Emmanuel IV, the son of the last king. His son is Emmanuel Filiberto, who also, of course, claims to be his father's heir, strangely enough. But he has no sons. He only has a daughter. It doesn't look like he's going to have any more kids, apparently, because he's proclaimed that his daughter will succeed him. Well, that's a violation of the laws of the House of Savoy. So, meanwhile, the Duke of Aosta's son, he just died, the Duke of Aosta, a year or two ago, but his son, Emone, carries on his father's claim to the throne. Emone's supporters tend to be more Catholic than Vittorio Emanuele's, but there are lots of Catholics on the other side too. None of this is easy. But all the claimants to the pre-existing thrones have their heirs, and those heirs all have partisans. So in the two Sicilies, your father's homeland, well, fortunately, not only does the House of Bourbon of Two Sicilies survive, and not only does it have adherents, it has its own succession dispute. Yes, indeed-o. The Duke of Calabria versus the Duke of Castro. Why? Well, the Duke of Calabria is undoubtedly, by primogeniture, the rightful heir. But he had a grandfather who gave up the right to the throne, supposedly, for he and his descendants in order to become an Infante of Spain. Well, when the previous heir, the undisputed heir, died, the Duke of Calabria's father or grandfather refused to go along with it. So he claims it. But then the next heir would be the Duke of Castro. So they have two Constantinian orders, two of everything. They're at loggerheads. But wait, there's more. Because they had a reconciliation when their ancestress, Maria Cristina, last queen of the two Sicilies, or penultimate queen, was beatified a few years ago, they came to an accommodation. The more so because the Duke of Castro had no sons, just daughters. And that lasted for like a year. And then the Duke of Castro decided, well, it's the modern era. Everybody is having the chicks inherit equally, so my daughter's my heiress. Well, the Duke of Calabria didn't go along with that. So you've got two Savoys, two Bourbons of two Sicilies. But wait, there's more. Because the Duke of the Grand Duke of Tuscany, descendants, yes, indeed. And very involved in Tuscan affairs, the Grand Duke Sigismondo. The Bourbon Parmas, oh, yes, indeed, oh, absolutely. But wait, you didn't think it was going to be easy, did you? And you were right. Because the last Duke of Parma, Robert, was the father of Zita, Empress of Austria, servant of God, wife of Karl. But his grandson inherited his son, Xavier, inherited the Carlist claims to the throne of Spain. Yes, this is boring you, but I'm trying to answer the question. And you see, sometimes intricate questions require intricate responses. But the current Duke of Parma is also a claimant to the throne of Spain. Now wait, there's more. Modena was the real interesting one, because Austria Este died out. The last Duke had only daughters. So what did he do? He made a rule that the next heir to the House of Habsburg would be his heir of Austria Este, but would lose it if he became Emperor of Austria, and it would go to the next. Ah, so you're asking yourself what happened. I'll tell you. When he died, his claims went to an Austrian archduke called Franz Ferdinand, who was also the heir to the Austrian throne. Yes, but when Franz Ferdinand died, his claim went to, you guessed it, his nephew Karl, who would become Emperor of Austria. Karl, in turn, renounced it because he was going to become Emperor of Austria. It went to a younger branch. Long and the short of it is, the heirs to Modena are the branch of the Habsburgs, who are now married to the sister of the King of Belgium. There. So, to answer your question, who would be the rightful King of Italy? Well, you can choose. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to choose from. Aimone or Victor Emmanuel, if you're going to go the Savoy route. Or if you're a particularist and you love your ancestral region in Italy, you can choose between Castro and Calabria if you're a Franchini. If you're, or contrary-wise, it's a lot easier if you're a Tuscan, a Parman, or a Modenan, because there's only one per. If you're a big Lombardy-Venetian fan, Archduke Karl of Austria-Hungary is in fact the king of Lombardo-Venetia. Lastly but not leastly, you may wonder, does anyone still push for the Papal States? Well, sort of. Obviously, since 1929, the popes have no longer claimed the Papal States. But that doesn't keep a lot of people from thinking that they should have them anyway. However, you may have noticed that some of the recent occupants of the throne may not be the best idea of somebody to actually run something in a temporal manner. Imagine Pope Francis running a real country. Think about that. So, are you ready for the cream of the chest?
I have been ready for 30 minutes.
The largest body of supporters of the restoration of the Papal States are Sedevacantists! Yes, you heard it here first. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean that you have to be a Sedevacantist to advocate restoration of the Papal States. No, it doesn't mean that. But that is one of those interesting little factoids. Isn't that neat? Did you realize your ancestral homeland was so complex?
I did.
Did you know it's filled with Italians?
I did.
From Sicily all the way up to the Val d'Ost. Italians everywhere you look. And you know why?
Why?
It's Italy. What did you think you were going to find? What, did you think you were going to go to Spain and find Dutch? Find Spaniards in Spain.
Okay, let's try this question one more time. So I'm going to read the question, and then you say one of the contenders, okay? All right, so Dawn from Florida asks, if my beloved Italia were reconstituted as a monarchy today, who would be the rightful heir to the throne? Charles?
Victor Emmanuel or Aimone of Savoia.
Oh, great. Thank you, Charles. All right, next question.
I guarantee you a lot of our viewers are going to find what I just said very interesting. I promise you.
It's very true. That's actually very true.
And you don't want to annoy patrons, trust me. Aren't you always the one who's telling me I got to suck up to? I mean, sorry, make nice to them.
Indeed, especially this next. So,
how many times after the show do you say, "I told you to make nice"? How many times?
All right.
Now it's my turn. Make nice to the patrons. If it's interesting to them, it's interesting to you. That's always been your rule. So live by it. I feel like
it was
I feel like a 7-year-old catching his dad out.
You got me, Charles. I don't know what to say. I mean,
Just say, I'm sorry, patrons, your interests are my interests. That's all you have to say.
I'm sorry, patrons. Your interests are my interests.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So I hope you continue that spirit and that attitude of wanting to
Sucking up.
give enriching questions and offering full, all the value that you can for these questions. Okay, so next question is from Danya Gina.
Oh, nepotismo. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got to answer the kappa now.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Watch how I do this. I'm not slouching in my seat. Notice?
Okay. All right. Very good, Charles. Very good. All right. Here we go. So Gina is reading Elena Marie Vidal's book, My Queen, My Love, a novel of Henrietta Maria, and is really wrapped up in Henrietta and how holy she is. Is there a cause for canonization for her?
Not to my knowledge. It wouldn't be a bad idea. There is I think, a good idea. Also, I don't know if Gina knows, or for that matter, if it's in the book. But Maria, Henrietta Maria, but who, by the way, Maryland was named after, just so you'll know. She, when she died, Bossuet, the great, what do you call it? Yeah, the great writer and so on.
Yeah.
On things Catholic. He when she died, gave a wonderful funeral oration, which is really, really worth reading. To show my belief in that, I am, as we speak, sending a link to it, both for the sake of Doña Gina and for if you deign to post it on the site, people will be able to look it up. She was also after her husband died, she spent a lot of time, amongst other things, pushing the by then new devotion of the Sacred Heart. In fact, there is a monastery in Paris that Henrietta Maria really endowed. I think it's a barracks or something today, but she was very instrumental in pushing devotion to the Sacred Heart there. I think it's Valgras or something like that. Let me just make sure I know what I'm talking about. But she was probably the first royal to really take an interest in the cause of the Sacred Heart. I'm trying to remember. I think it was the Val de Grace. The Val de Grace, the Abbey of Val de Grace, which is now the church is still there, but it's a military hospital. It was closed, gosh, in 2016. But at any rate, they were Benedictine nuns originally, and she took a big, really, really big role in that. So I think, it certainly would not be a bad thing to start such a cause. It's the same is true, incidentally, of James II's wife, Maria Modena. People have talked about pushing for a cause for her. So, and one of the things too about Henriette Marie. Not only did she work hard to try to bring her husband and her kingdom to the faith, but she publicly venerated the martyrs at Tyburn in London.
Hmm.
Another woman like that was Charles II's wife, uh, uh, Maria Braganza, who St. John Eudes was actually her chaplain in London. Anyhow, that's I have to say that whatever I should say about the Stuarts, they married well.
Of course. The other thing, kind of a tangential thing, because obviously Henrietta Maria is married to Charles I, and in the novelization, she's constantly worried about his whether he died a Catholic or not. It's very complex. You wrote an article on this. Is
I
Charles
did.
I a saint? There's a lot of controversy. Apparently, he said something on his deathbed about to his kids about, I don't know, promoting some Protestant books or something. But so what's going on there? Is there anything you have to say about Charles I?
Yeah, it's a little bit like George Washington's conversion.
Hmm.
We'll never hear the end of it this side of the grave.
But there's room either way. I mean,
I would say so.
yeah.
I mean, ultimately, too, it's rather like with the Orthodox saints that various popes, like Pius XII and XI, have permitted Catholics to venerate.
Hmm.
There are times in history when the boundaries between the Catholic faith, the Catholic Church, I should say, not the faith, the structures of the church and those outside get a little weird and vague. Um, one of the things I always thought was very interesting as an example, remember that at the time that Charles I was alive, unlike now where, thanks to Leo XIII, we can say that the Church of England is a Protestant body, it wasn't so clear back then. And the fact that the Pope would offer Archbishop Laud of Canterbury the red hat twice, which he'd only have done incidentally with Charles I's permission. Laud laughingly refused both times. But the point is, the Pope could not have made the offer unless Charles signed off on it. Now, the fact that the offer was made by the Pope shows that at the time, although we know he was wrong, the Pope thought that Anglican orders were as valid as Orthodox orders, and that the break was a question of schism and not of heresy, and that the Church of England was an apostolic body.
Oh.
But see, we know different, but that's because we're living post Leo XIII when he made it clear as to why. But Rome had not got into it definitively at that point. So it's a little bit like when Pius the Ninth, Blessed Pius the Ninth, called Vatican I, and he invited all the Eastern patriarchs, the Eastern Orthodox patriarchs, to the council as full participants. Which, what does that mean? Well, it's we. Now they all refused, but that's beside the point. The invitation means his view of their relationship with the church was different, shall we say, to our view.
I see.
And actually, the same is true of the councils of Florence and Lyon, and any attempted reunion. The fact that they've been invited, well, it's like with Benedict XVI declaring that the Orthodox and the lesser Eastern churches are the only ones you can properly call churches because they have the apostolic succession. I mean, when you start looking at these historical things, sometimes the frontiers get very weird and wavy, and it's hard to put your finger on them. And that's the difference between Charles I and C.S. Lewis. The boundary between the Church of England and the Church of Rome was not as clear, certainly not in Charles's mind. to him as it was to
Oh,
C.S. Lewis.
I see. That's interesting. Um, so we were talking about this before the pre-show. I had mentioned the deathbed Protestant thing, and you said that didn't seem to jive with something.
Well, the thing is, he said he died on his when he died at his execution. He said he died a member of the Church of England as his father had it. But bear in mind that the coronation oaths of the kings of England had not changed at that point since before the Reformation. He took the same oath that Henry VIII took, that Richard III took, that Henry VI took, just to uphold the church in England. Well, what does that mean?
I see.
When he died, when he was in prison before he died, he made a vow to God that he would restore the monasteries owned by the crown to the church if he was spared and given his kingdom back. Not unlike Louis XVI's promise to consecrate France to the Sacred Heart. Now, that does not sound like a Protestant. And he venerated the Virgin Mary and the Eucharist and did all sorts of things like that that a proper Protestant in those days simply wouldn't have done. It's interesting reading the Puritan tracts, quote unquote, proving him to be a Catholic rather than a Protestant that came out at the time. And of course, his negotiations for reunion with Rome were one of the things thrown up at his trial. It's one of the things that killed him. So, you look at all this stuff. Jazz hands.
I see. All right.
Well, but if you pray for his intercession and you get it, guess what?
What?
You got his intercession, which probably would not be the case if he's in hell or purgatory. Well, maybe in purgatory.
Have there been recorded cases of that?
Of miracles? Yeah.
On his behalf? Wow.
But not in recent years to Roman Catholics. And that, of course, for those Catholics in communion with the Holy Father who would like to see him venerated as a saint the way many ostensibly Eastern Orthodox saints are, that's what would be needed.
I see.
It would be a miracle. The only way that this thing could possibly be settled this side of the grave would be for a miracle to occur and for the church to certify it.
Okay. All right, very good, Charles. Thank you for the very educational and informational pre-show.
Even the boring stuff about Italy?
Even the boring stuff about Italy, because well, actually, it's
how
very
could
refreshing.
How could anything about Italy be boring?
Well, that's true.
Hoist on your own petard, trapped in a web of your own making. Let me tell you something, kid. If it's Italian, it's interesting.
Well said, Charles. All right, and if you haven't had enough, we still got a full episode coming at you.
We have. Hard to believe, but true.
Stay tuned. See you soon.